It's actually wonderful to be speaking after Henry. Very important when we think of the videos this week, Eric Garner, the murder, and what we're seeing in Gaza, it hits you in the gut in the same way. You're watching a murder. And it's also so very true that Israel is based on the experience of the U.S., a country built on racism, land theft, and genocide. And we have to know that at every moment, every crime that's being committed right now by Israel in Gaza is completely not only funded and equipped by the U.S., couldn't exist a minute without U.S. support, but it's driven home in ways that there was a congressional Senate resolution passed unanimously, 100 votes, not one dissenting vote. Congress, it was copying a resolution passed by Congress, giving absolute support for Israel. No mention made of the more than 1,500 Palestinians who've been murdered. Now, when you think of the resolution, and this goes from Republicans and Democrats to Libertarians, Rand Paul, and in Congress to Socialist Bernie Sanders. So, Democrat or Republican, both houses of Congress, complete resolution of support. It's a form of discipline that the ruling class imposes on every politician in the U.S. You expect you're going to have a political future. Don't you dare go beyond the bounds of ever having a line of criticism for Israel. And they publicly drove that lesson home to six-time member Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. It was like a public scourging, really. She was denied her seat in Congress 3 times. Her district was redistricted. And she came back time after time. And then they assigned her a district that looked like a coiled snake. I mean, it went from house to house. It was totally distorted. No one even knew what the district was, and drove her out of Congress. Or we could look at City Councilman Charles Barron, the other supporter we could think of for Palestine. So it's a constant discipline imposed by the ruling class of complete support for Israel. All kinds of other dissension may be allowed, but that's how important Israel is to U.S. imperialism. General Haig called it the unsinkable aircraft carrier. He didn't talk about a homeland for Jewish people. Had nothing to do with it. This is the U.S. instrument of power in the region. It's weapon. But the weapon doesn't fire the way it should anymore. You think back to 1967, when U.S. imperialism could brag. They didn't need an army in the Middle East. They had the Israeli army. It was an extension of the U.S. Army. They treated it that way. They armed and equipped it that way. And it could make war on Syria and Egypt at the same time. Very destructive, seize huge swaths of land. But starting in 2000, when Hezbollah drove the Israelis out of Lebanon, those days are numbered. Those days are numbered. And the 2006 Israeli invasion of Lebanon, they couldn't claim a square meter. They were literally driven out. So their next wars were against tiny Gaza, most concentrated, impoverished highest population density of any place on earth. So a war on Gaza, 2009, 2012, they both ended actually in ceasefires, where Israel did not accomplish its goals. That's important to recognize, because that means, in a real way, to survive in a struggle like this, to survive and fight another day, really means you've won. That's the truth of it. That's the truth of it, is if the most highly equipped military in the world, the largest recipient of U.S. aid for more than 6 decades, and yet they have not been able to defeat the Palestinian people. Now that is a real example in the capacity of people to resist. So this week, the news is like a huge disconnect. You know, there was a book Dickens wrote about the French Revolution called A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. When you think of this congressional unanimous Senate vote for Israel, and then you think of the resolutions all over the world, or even the UN Human Rights Commission, 29-1, only the U.S. voting for Israel. And even the other imperialist pirates and thieves, and that's who the European powers are. They weren't doing it for any reason except the pressure from below. So 17 countries abstained. But only the U.S. was there to defend their army, their client in the region. That's a big change. That's a big change. So I want to touch on, because there was a tremendous report given last week by Joyce Chediak, and I really do want to really raise everyone here should have the book on Gaza. Just to give an update of some of the things happening this week, because it is a real divide. And you could say it's in the tale of two cities, when they're two totally different realities. That is the kind of clash that leads to a revolutionary conflagration. I mean, this is becoming a very dangerous situation. Now, there was a ceasefire declared. It was supposed to last 72 hours. I think it lasted 3 before Israel again broke it. There was a ceasefire 2 days before. Israel said it was a 4-hour ceasefire. People desperately rushed to the market just to stock up on essential foods, and during that very time they bombed the market during the ceasefire, and came back and bombed the rescue workers who were pulling people out of rubble. So this ceasefire lasted 3 hours, and then they claimed that an Israeli lieutenant had been captured and they were therefore breaking the ceasefire. Now, we don't know if it's true. That would be a tremendous development, although Hamas says it's not true, that it's simply a reason for breaking the ceasefire. So we have to take that into account too. Now, I want to mention something also, especially about the tunnels. Israel says that they have taken now, and they're building like a free fire zone, a complete area 3 kilometers in along. Gaza is just a thin, sandy strip, 18 kilometers wide at the widest point. Israel is building a 3-kilometer free fire, no-go zone. And this is taking 44% of the land of tiny Gaza, so small already, just shrinking it in. And what are they doing in this area? Every building, the entire infrastructure, could be roads, electricity, plumbing, water, every rubble. They're just totally destroying it. They've declared that theirs. And they're shrinking tiny small Gaza by another 44%. Because they consider these tunnels such a risk. Now, these tunnels are quite an accomplishment. They're really quite can you imagine in this day and age of such incredible the NSA, National Surveillance Agency, supposedly has recorded every phone call, every internet, every form of communication on the globe, right? Along with spies and drones and the use of torture. And yet, hundreds and hundreds of tunnels covering hundreds of square miles. I mean, thousands of people must have participated in building these tunnels that go right into Israel and also into Egypt to bring in needed supplies. And many of them now are cement, concrete reinforced, and they have fuel lines running through them and some lighting and so on. So that means thousands of people took part in building these tunnels. And the Israelis didn't know. Don't know where they are, don't know how to find them. And these tunnels, they managed to smuggle in all kinds of missiles and weapons. That shows how deep the resistance is. This is not a small operation. No, I mean, this is a resistance of the whole people. In Gaza, there are many different political parties, religious parties, different groupings, and they cooperate with each other against the occupation in a way that is really powerful. Quite an accomplishment. I mean, just picture what it takes to make those tunnels and how many people took part in it. And any one of them probably could have got an exit ticket and several $1 million for giving a plan, right? So, really, we should applaud a resistance that can make an accomplishment like that. Now, I want to talk about the different forms resistance takes. This was a headline: NBA players call off Israel visit. Magic Johnson and other past and present NBA stars decided not to attend the inauguration of Jerusalem's spectacular multi-purpose sports arena in September. Now, isn't that's sort of like the boycott, divest, sanctions movement made real for the people here, right? If Magic Johnson says, I'm going to boycott Israel, boy, that's serious stuff. You know, that's a big deal. Now, it also takes place in subtle ways. Anonymous hackers, yesterday, they took down Mossad's website. So, that's important too. See, resistance takes all different forms. From world-famous basketball stars, that's a big deal. I really think Magic Johnson, I want to salute. Right. All over the world, this has become a huge phenomenon. Now, there was a headline, 5 Latin American countries withdraw their envoys from Israel. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. And then today at the rally, one of the speakers said it's 7 Latin American countries that have withdrawn their ambassadors from Israel. Breaking diplomatic relations, that's a big step also. That's a real slap at the U.S. and at Israel. It was Brazil and Chile and Ecuador and Peru had already recalled their ambassadors, in El Salvador on Wednesday. And so, at any rate, we could look at Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador. So, at any rate, that's an important example of what is happening on a global scale. Now, I'm touching on several things because there's so many huge developments in the world. I mean, this is a world issue, and every country in the world is in one way or another weighing in on it. And almost every social formation, and religious parties and political parties, and it was big news, what was it, 2 weeks ago for the Presbyterian Church. Now there's a very conservative, cautious church, but they endorsed the boycott, divest, and sanction for Israel and all Israeli investments. They declared they were going to divest themselves of. These are body blows, in one sense, to Israel and its legitimacy. And they are saying, not legitimate, war criminal. This is labeling Israel an apartheid state. And it's also a slap at U.S. imperialism that's heard round the world. Now, it comes at enormous cost, and we really should, when we think it's not only those who build the tunnels. There was a rather amazing video of a military action through the tunnels, attacking an Israeli base. There were 5 Israeli soldiers killed. And it was all recorded and then posted online. A little video camera on the front of one of the soldiers' helmet. So that's been seen. I don't know how many views. It would be interesting to know how many people have watched that video. But the very identification with those who, and the amount of training it takes, the amount of discipline, the amount of risk. There's a message from the Abu Ali Mustafa Brigades, which is the arm wing of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, describing their armed actions. And in quite a number of them, they've also cooperating with other armed groups, including Hamas and Popular Resistance Committees and so on. And it describes the ambushes of occupation soldiers, the missiles. There's a real lesson in all of this, because what is it that, why this attack? What's Israel trying to accomplish? What's the Zionist state so desperate to do? A unity government was announced between Fatah and Hamas. And that is really the breaking point for Israel. This attack is how to break any form of unity in the Palestinian struggle. And this is always U.S. policy: divide and rule. Ancient imperialist policy. It's the way they look at Iraq, how to keep Iraq divided, broken up. It's their policy towards Syria. It's their policy here in the U.S. How to use racism and every form of bigotry and backwardness and funding of right-wing organizations. It's an essential tool of the Zionists, and one that they're willing to go to war to enforce. Now, the response around the world isn't only in resolutions. There was also an announcement coming from Turkey that the Freedom Flotilla and the Mavi Marmara was going to sail again. And right away, all of the other ships that had attempted to sail to Gaza in the past, from Canada and Gaza's Ark and from Australia and others, immediately also posted notes and began to make their preparations. That's important to know, that the determination to do everything to help Gaza survive and rebuild again is there. Now, we don't know how long this attack is going to go, how long it could possibly go. We know with pain the comparisons to the Warsaw Ghetto. We know what the Nazis did to the Warsaw Ghetto. And everyone here who has seen any of the videos of the attacks on schools, the attacks on a playground, kids on swings, 4 young boys playing soccer on a beach. These aren't military targets. But maybe the worst target was the bombing of the power station. Gaza is flat and sandy. And when you knock out the power, then the ability of even pumping water for sanitation, for sewage, that is beyond criminal. That is genocide. And the bombing of that power station, it's not just electricity. It's life and it's water. This is all extremely, extremely dangerous. Now, Netanyahu, on the day in which there were 10 Israeli soldiers killed, because it's 50, I believe, 50 soldiers, 2 civilians. Yeah. And on the part, 56 and 3, thank you. And on the part of the Palestinians, more than 1,500, more than 80% of them civilians, a third of them children.
1,500 this morning.
1,500 as of this morning. 16, that's right. 1,650 as of today. So Netanyahu spoke at a press conference and he said this will be a protracted struggle. That's a deadly threat. And we have to take it extremely seriously, because the challenge for us is both how to stay in the streets, how to build solidarity, and how to use the weapons that we have in terms of education and mobilization to expand and grow the Palestinian movement. Now, there have been in the past 3 weeks, almost every other day, sometimes every day, major important demonstrations. Some are thousands, some are hundreds, some are sit-ins, some are CDs. We've just all come, that's why the meeting started late tonight, from a big demonstration. Very important, from Columbus Circle, CNN's headquarters, to Fox News. Targeting lying propaganda, just complete war propaganda. Many of us are going tomorrow to Washington, to the Answer demonstration in front of the White House. Very important. And then we have to think, how do we take it the next step? We can't just say, oh, well, we're tired. We had a demonstration Friday and Saturday. No, we don't have a plan for next week. There are thousands of flyers in the back, because there is a next step. It's August 9th. It's a march from Columbus Circle to the United Nations. We're calling it an international march for Gaza. And what is it really an attempt to do? This is a city of immigrants. This is a city of so many people from different countries, along with a workers' movement here. And there's many, many people who want to participate in a march for Gaza, who toot their horns, who wave, who applaud, who take out their cell phones, and yet don't have a way in. Because the demonstrations of the past few weeks have literally been built, sometimes on 2 days' notice, on Facebook. Now, that's quite an accomplishment. That's quite an accomplishment. But if you're not the Facebook friends of a certain group, how do you find out? So we have to go back to some old-fashioned ways, leafleting, even on any street corner, at community meetings, at a church. Who wouldn't take this leaflet? I was trying today during the demonstration, you know, you're both leafleting at the demonstration, but people on the street, they were even more interested. Everyone on the demonstration, in a way, they're already linked in, right? They'll hear about the next event. They heard about this one. But how do we take these flyers and reach a much wider milieu? That's a big challenge, and yet it is why we exist, to be a workers' party that reaches out to the workers here as this class exists. in all of its multinational dimensions. Now, we're having a mobilizing meeting on Tuesday at St. Peter's. It's a coalition effort, Break the Siege Coalition. And already about 50 organizations have signed up to support next Saturday's October 9th demonstration, and many, many of them to be at this mobilizing meeting next Tuesday at St. Peter's Church. It's a Citicorp Center. That's called the Jazz Church. It's a great, centrally located, 54th and Lexington. Every subway train stops there. You don't have any trouble finding it. And I want to encourage everyone here not just to attend the meeting, but to invite others, to invite organizations and tenant groups, union friends, to see who else will sign up, line up to stand for Palestine. And I bet there's almost no one you invite who wouldn't be honored to accept the invitation. So it's a test of our reach, too. And we only know if we really, really try. So for those going to Washington tomorrow, I hope you're taking lots of these flyers. But those who are doing anything this weekend, take a stack of flyers with you and make sure other people get it. Everyone here who is on Facebook, and I'll bet just about everyone here is, you'd better send an invitation to every friend that you know. And make sure that the same thing with Twitter and Instagram and every other form of social communication, because that makes an impact. How do we reach beyond? And personal phone calls and texts, they make a big difference. So we're treating Tuesday as a mobilizers meeting. Everyone who comes to that meeting, the question is, what are you doing to build August 9th? Anyone who takes the floor, no grandstanding, no speeches, just one question. Anyone who takes the floor has got to describe what they're doing concretely to build for August 9th. Now that's a great agenda because it will assure that it's a working meeting. I'm going to wind up with this, but now we don't know how long this struggle will go on. As long as it's going on, we have to be in the streets for Palestine and be thinking and working with so many allies as to the right tactics and how to build this movement, how to strengthen it. We have to really be proposing ideas and listening to ideas, supporting those who have ideas and contributing to this struggle. It's a real discussion that we're having with many, many allies. We expect next Saturday to be a major demonstration. Now, if the war is over, it'll be entirely different. But from what Netanyahu, the Zionists are saying, what the U.S. Senate is saying, what the White House is saying, what Secretary of State is running all over the world, at every point defending Israel, denouncing Hamas. What every one of them are saying is this is a protracted war. We have a plan for this coming week, and we're going to continue to make plans, build real solidarity, and bring new forces into this struggle to stand with Gaza. Thank you. Just in closing comments, what is it that Zionism and what is it that U.S. imperialism is so determined to destroy? What are they targeting, the Palestinians? Why is it so dangerous? It's the very idea of resistance. It's what galvanizes people. It's what draws the attention of the whole world. And asserting and defending the right to resist. It's extremely important politically and looking for ways to do it, because it is resistance that changes people, changes ideas. It takes a certain confrontation to push back a reactionary or racist idea. Now, what's happening now in Israel? And what's happening among many Jewish people who did support in the past, unquestioning, that's what they were taught, Israel. What's happening? It's a resistance of the Palestinians that's forcing them to reevaluate. That's where it's coming from. One very interesting, and a number of them are people who were arch-Zionists. I mean, these were the mouthpieces, the spokespeople, and they come from Zionist families, as Henry was mentioning, this general's son. There was someone else, Henry Siegman. He's a former national director of the American Jewish Congress. He's actually been on Democracy Now! The last few days. Now, this is a quote. He said, "It was Israel's assault on Gaza. It was not triggered by Hamas's rockets. It was directed by Israel because it was Israel's determination to bring down the Palestinian unity government that was formed in early June. Even though Hamas and the government in Gaza was committed to honoring all of the conditions imposed by the international community for the recognition of its legitimacy." So, now it's one thing for anyone else to say this, but this is a former national director of the American Jewish Congress, making a pretty fundamental break. And making that break not because Israel isn't doing what it's done again and again and again, but the level of resistance is what is forcing a reevaluation. If you watch some of these videos of young resistors in Israel refusing to enlist, refusing to be called up for the reserves, that's important too. It's the resistance that's happening in the West Bank, where in the tens and tens of thousands, the Palestinians in the West Bank who've been under lockdown are literally, and again it's at risk of their life, are in the streets. So I think there's big changes we will see in the days ahead, and we want to look for a lot of ways. And there are different forms of resistance here. There are demonstrations, there's civil disobedience actions, there's people who are, there are boats that come in to different places in New York Harbor that are from Israel. There's different tactics that we want to look at to find all different forms of being with this struggle. And at the same time knowing that we're also building struggles for the workers right here, which we can't lose sight of. The World Business Forum in October. Now that's an important struggle, raising both a minimum wage, and yet the youth took it to a new example, new height. They said, well, we're going to march against capitalism itself. So that's important, because once people start to struggle, new forms of struggle break out, and we learn new things. And we're going to learn a lot in the period ahead, in the days ahead, and I'm sure everyone here, you've already been in the street so many days, so many times. It's late tonight, we're coming from another demonstration, but really think who you can bring to Tuesday's meeting, how you can consciously play a role in that meeting. Not going to sit on your hands, to take the floor, even if it's for a minute, to describe what you can do to build August 9th. So that's homework to do, to really think about that, plan for it, and plan for how you can mobilize forces for August 9th. Thank you. And last point, Palestine will win.